Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Rennie Center's Condition of Education Community Conversation on Rethinking Education in Massachusetts. My name is Alexis Leon, and I am the Director of Policy at the Rennie Center. I'm thrilled to be here with such a distinguished group of education innovators, policymakers, and leaders as we dive into critical and complex questions together. Before we begin our discussion, I want to take a moment to highlight the Condition of Education project, which serves as a cornerstone of the Rennie Center's mission to advance nonpartisan, high-quality, and independent research aimed at improving public education for all children in Massachusetts. Through core components like the in-person release event, the action guide, our data dashboard, and community conversations like the one we'll have today, this project offers a comprehensive platform to examine key challenges, highlight innovative practices, and foster collaborative dialogue that drives meaningful and equitable improvements in education statewide. With this context in mind, let's turn our attention to the opportunities before us, how we can build on the strengths of our education system while reimagining its structures to better align with the aspirations and potential of all students. Modern scholarship often describes schools as engines for democratic participation, shared knowledge, and social mobility. Yet, if you ask students, especially those historically marginalized by an education system not designed for their success, their answers may tell a different story. This disconnect between the ideals of education and students' lived experiences raises profound questions. Are schools designed to meet their intended purpose? Many of the structures we take for granted, like grade levels defined by age, standardized schedules, and rigid course sequences, are more a product of tradition than intention. They persist not because they serve all students well, but because they are woven into mythology of schooling. And the data is sobering. In 2020, before the pandemic, the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence reported that 75% of students surveyed felt negatively about school. 50% were tired, 70% were bored, and 80% were stressed. These struggles were only intensified by the COVID-19 pandemic. Chronic absenteeism has spiked in Massachusetts and across the nation. Meanwhile, technological, societal, and economic shifts demand that schools do more than transfer knowledge. The education ecosystem must help students think critically, adapt to new challenges, and find relevance and purpose in their learning. This moment calls for more than incremental changes. It calls for a bold rethinking of our education system. That's why the Rennie Center's Rethinking Education Agenda and the 2025 Condition of Education Action Guide are so critical. By focusing on rethinking people, place, and time in education, and fostering space for research and development in our schools, this agenda challenges us to ask, what if schools truly reflected the needs and aspirations of all students? Our panelists today have embraced this challenge and many others in their work. They've pushed boundaries, experimented with bold ideas, and reimagined what school can be. Today, we'll explore their journeys, the barriers they faced, the enabling conditions that have supported them, and their visions for a more innovative, equitable, and effective education system here in Massachusetts. So it is my privilege to introduce our panelists for today's conversation. First, we have Almi Abeta, the Superintendent of Chelsea Public Schools. Next, Thomas Arnett, Senior Research Fellow at the Clayton Christensen Institute. Chelsea Banks, Dean of Innovation, Collins Middle School and Salem Public Schools. Thabiti Brown, the former head of school at Codman Academy Charter Public School, former board chair of the Felix School and lecturer at Brandeis University. And Karen Tucker, AFT Massachusetts Vice President and 8th grade ELA teacher at Collins Middle School in Salem Public Schools. Thank you all for joining us today. It's a pleasure to have you all. All right, so to begin the conversation, hopefully with an opening reflection, each of you has sought to push the boundaries of what education could look like in Massachusetts. So let's start with a quick reflection for the group. What was the core challenge that you were trying to solve in your work, and how did that shape your vision? And Thabiti, we're going to start with you, if that's all right.
Nice, thank you. Great to be here, Alexis. Really appreciate the invite from the Rennie Center, and great to be on this panel with you all, talking about education in the state of Massachusetts. I am a longtime educator. I've been in the game for 25 plus years, started as a history, English, language arts teacher, was a dean principal, and then superintendent for a small charter school in Boston. I think through all that time, we served many students well, both in my classroom and at the school, Common Academy Charter Public School. And we didn't serve some of the students who were in our mix. And so our intention in starting the Felix Commonwealth Virtual School was to create an opportunity to have a very personalized learning experience where young people could actually build and grow pathways of learning for themselves. One that was decoupled from what we would call the tyranny of time in a traditional school. We saw that during the pandemic when students were able to do school in the evenings or on the weekends or early in the morning and go to work or take care of their family. It changed many young people's experiences in school. And so we wanted to build that model out and to give students more of an opportunity to grow their own learning and their own time, to unleash that possibility of growth in that experience. So that was the main idea. And I think in the end, and I'll say more about this later, a bit too outside of the box for the current model, to be able to subsume those innovative practices that we had in mind.
Awesome. Thank you. Almi, can we head to your experience? What was the core challenge you were trying to solve, or currently trying to solve in Chelsea Public Schools?
Sure. So we partnered with Ignite Reading. That's an online high dosage tutoring that our students are receiving, all first grade students actually. And so what we're trying to solve and really is making sure that our kids are reading on grade level by third grade. And so with Ignite Tutoring, our students during their literacy block get high doses of tutoring. It's every day they get the same tutor, and that's the beauty of it, because in Chelsea Public Schools, we say that our students will know them by name, strength, and story. So the students get high dosage tutoring, 15 minutes a day during the literacy block that need the intervention. And it's just been phenomenal. So I'll tell you a bit more about it later. But again, it's really about making sure we're closing achievement gaps early, that every student is reading on grade level by third grade.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. All right, we're going to turn to Salem Public Schools. Maybe we'll hear from Chelsea first and then Karen just about the core challenges you were trying to solve and are currently trying to solve in Salem.
Excellent. Thank you so much for having both of us. It's both wonderful to be here and incredible to have Karen here with us to represent our educators. I think coming out of the pandemic, we found that the relationship between middle schoolers and school, which had been perhaps tenuous at best, really felt broken. And so even with incredible educators like Karen trying to do everything they could to meet the needs of students, particularly that like factory model of rotating through all of the periods in a day and not giving students the opportunity to connect and feel a sense of belonging within school, had us with lots of students looking for other ways to learn and find connection that wasn't necessarily inside the classroom. And so with a superintendent whose office is on the 6th grade hallway in our comprehensive middle school, we really got the opportunity to think differently and begin with a pilot of just 43 students in 2 classrooms and think about what would it look like? And so within the confines of the school day and our teacher's contract, which is why Karen's here, we were able to really think differently about the use of time, really thinking about what does personalized learning look like at a traditional public middle school within our model? How do we empower students and their voices? And looking at community-based learning, design thinking in schools, and really trying to unlock and empower our students by listening to them and their families about what the answers are. Karen can say more.
Thank you, Chelsea. Karen, maybe we can turn to you to give a little bit more nuance to that voice, especially from an educator and from your experience with the union. If you can speak to some of the core challenges from your perspective, that would be great.
Yes. So again, thank you for having me. And it's really nice to be able to give Teacher Voice a platform. So I think I was very excited when we started to discuss this in Salem, because I had noticed even before the pandemic that middle school was not working. Traditional middle school was not working for our middle schoolers. They were very unhappy. I was unhappy. And so I was excited to try something new, and do it within the teacher contract and be able to innovate and feel like you had a voice and you had a part in this, and that you could speak for your students and your lived experiences and make change in big ways instead of just little tiny ways, and to make school more enjoyable for teachers, for students, and for families.
Wonderful. Thanks, Karen. All right. And Thomas, we're going to turn to you last, sharing maybe some insights around your research and innovation theory. Hearing more from your perspective would be great.
Well, thanks for the opportunity to participate in this group. I will say my story and the problem I've been trying to solve also starts in middle school. Before I was a research fellow, I was a middle school math teacher and really struggled with how do I meet the diverse range of needs of the students in my classroom, from the kid who's missed a ton of school because he's dealing with homelessness to the kid who's on top of his work because his parents are making sure he's turning in his assignments every night. There's just such a diversity of where students are at, and I often thought, I don't know how you meet all these students' needs in a system where everyone is expected to move at the same pace and get the same lesson every day with minor variations. And that led me to ultimately realize that I think what we need is not a tweaking of curriculum or a tweaking of instructional practice. It's actually a change in the design of how we do schooling. So my work centers on systems change and systems redesign. But I'll say one of the big insights from our work and our research is that it's really hard to do systems redesign by trying to tweak and tinker within an existing system that is still expected to deliver what that system has been delivering for people. So think of it as like trying to transition from a system of rail travel to get across the country to a system of airlines, or to transition from horse and buggy to automobiles, but not just make that transition, but do it while imagine trying to take trains and turn them into airplanes and train the train engineers to be the airline pilots, and all while keeping the trains running on time. It's really tricky. So our work is really about how do you create the conditions that allow new things to emerge, new models of schooling to emerge that can hopefully one day in the future become the new normal of education. And I'll say as a quick preview, that doesn't necessarily mean it has to be outside of public education, but it does mean we have to think very differently about how do we go about transformation in public education.
Wonderful. Thank you, Thomas. And I think that was a perfect segue into our next kind of group of questions. So for our next kind of batch of questions here, we're really interested in that how. What were the enabling conditions? So thinking of each of your journeys in the challenges you were hoping to solve, what specific conditions, so this could be structural, cultural, policy-driven, enabled you to make progress, or perhaps prevented you from moving forward your vision? So were there moments where flexibility or creativity in the system really made a difference or could have made a difference? And if it was, what would that have looked like? So maybe Almi, we'll start with you. Maybe if you can talk a little bit about what those enabling conditions looked like.
Okay. First, we had to have the conditions of an ecosystem for literacy. So we applied for a grant through the 1-8 Foundation, and part of receiving that grant was we had to have high quality instructional materials that were research based. So we had high quality instructional materials that are research based, and so therefore we were awarded this wonderful grant through the 1-8 Foundation. So first it's of course finances, right? And then they had chosen Ignite Reading to really experiment a little bit. So at first, I will say, if you talk to our teachers, our first grade teachers and some of our staff, they were very hesitant about doing this. They're like, oh gee, what is central office doing? One more thing, which I get because I used to teach and I was also principal. And it's online. We just came out of Zoom. Why are we doing something online? The last thing we want is first graders to be online. So a lot of our teachers were a little skeptical. They were skeptics at first. But once we started talking to them about why this was a little different, then we're like, just try it. Let's, just work with us. Let's see how it goes. And the unique thing about this was normally when you provide tutoring online, it's after school and extended learning. At least that's the normal model. what Ignite was very clear about is like, this has to happen during the school day, because in order for this to work, the kids have to have continuous learning with learning like phonemic awareness, learning how to crack the code for reading, and that has to happen every single day. So our first grade teams, they identified students who were struggling and not on benchmark. Those were the students that received this high dosage tutoring. Teachers were also saying, well, 15 minutes a day, really, is that really going to help? But what happens is every student receives 15 minutes high dosage tutoring a day from one tutor online. It's research-based literacy, phonemic awareness. They're learning how to crack the code. The tutors are trained. So, and the curriculum and the phonemic awareness, everything it spirals up. So the kids are learning to crack the code. And when you walk into a classroom, let's say you have 15 kids who are not on grade level, they're receiving this tutoring. And they have headphones on, they're engaged, like super engaged. They don't even know that the world exists around them with their sound, they're soundproof headphones, and they're engaged with their tutors, and they're sounding out words. They're all at different levels, different places. And so it's phenomenal, because where else am I going to find, let's say, 15 tutors to come into a classroom and work with our students and really teach reading skills? And then the other kids who are not receiving this tutoring, they're receiving instruction, and those are our kids that are on grade level. And what world do the kids that are on grade level, even above grade level, receive more instruction with literacy? So it's a win-win for everyone. And again, the kids love this time. They run to get their Chromebooks. They're like so excited about their Ignite reading time. And it's like a sound of music when you walk into those classrooms. What I failed to share is that I used to teach kindergarten. And so you could see how excited I am about this, because the kids are there with their headsets and they're sounding out words like and all of them are doing sounding out different words, learning to read. And we're getting some amazing results, which I can talk about later.
Amazing. Awesome. That is very beautiful. I wish I could hear those little voices. Awesome. All right, Thabiti, we're going to head to you next.
Thank you. It's been great hearing all the different models and the ways in which you all are thinking about this idea of evolving education. I'm appreciative of thinking about high dosage tutoring and the opportunity to be able to do that with virtual instructors from anywhere. I'm appreciative of the idea of building within Salem a model that can help to reach every student, right? The system already exists, but you're building innovative practice within it. And I'm appreciative of Thomas talking about systems change requiring more than tweaking. It's actually requiring some breaking of systems. And I just want to name that. That was a structural push that the team at the Field School was invested in from the very beginning. We understand that there, as you said in the beginning, Alexis, high rates of young people who are disengaged, high rates of young people who are bored, including my own teenagers in my own home, high rates of folks who are not experiencing this high quality educational experience that we would want for all of our children. And so Felix went about using technology to actually break through some of those pieces. So what if we created an opportunity for a young person to go to a local hub site at a Boys and Girls Club, to have on-site staffing members who are part of this virtual school who could support them with social emotional learning, with needs, but also there's food on site. Also, there's access to really high quality a gym equipment. There's a basketball court, and they could get their learning from instructors from anywhere in the world, literally, through their virtual platform and still have a community, right? The technology already exists for this, you all. In terms of our structure, we have, I don't know what the percentage is right now, but white collar workers all over the country work in a hybrid way. They do their work in one location some days and in another location other days. We wanted that for K-12 and not just for the wealthiest. So structurally, we're talking about what was the best of pods during the pandemic. What we know is that wealthy folk had a lot of access to hiring a specialized tutor who could sit with that group of small group of young people. Most public school folks don't have that opportunity. So we wanted to democratize and increase the opportunity for more people. I want to say a couple things about partners. This model that we're proposing, although it's weird for Massachusetts, it exists all over the place, right? We had great partners at ASU Global Prep who are helping us to build out the virtual online learning. We had amazing partners at local Boys and Girls Clubs like at the West End House in Lawrence. These folks already had communities, and our ASU Prep partners already had schools who were doing this model. And so when we talk about systems, those partners already existed that we could piece together that system here. The system got stuck here through DESE, and I believe at the end of the day, the model was sufficiently unusual to be able to fit in the many boxes of the current system as it currently stands. And I can say more about that as time goes on too.
Thank you so much, Tamidi. Thank you. All right, let's move to Chelsea and Karen. If we can kind of think through what were the enabling conditions, again, in this traditional public school model in Salem. And maybe Chelsea, I'll go to you first.
Yeah, I so appreciate the way that everybody is both sharing and framing the work. I think when we thought about launching this work, our goals were to help our students feel connected, empowered, and growing. And how do we make that true for every middle schooler inside, as we've said, a traditional public school? And so the structures from the start, we had very strong leadership. At the time, Mayor Driscoll, now Lieutenant Governor Driscoll, was pushing for what's possible coming out of the pandemic. We had a Superintendent Stephen Strike, who was from the start. So I started at Salem Public Schools running the response to COVID for 2 years and trying to figure out from the start, how do we embed best practices instructionally into our reopening plans? And so it quickly shifted into a focus in middle school, but that leadership was more so saying, how come not more kids? When we started, we said we can all fit on one bus, and we don't totally know what we're doing yet in this world of figuring things out. So let's start with one bus, 2 classrooms full of kids, and a humanities teacher and a STEM teacher and a paraprofessional. And so that strong leadership was critical. And then I will also speak to partnerships, as we've heard about. But from the start, we met the WPS Institute, which is a Newton-based nonprofit that has been an on-the-ground design partner. So not only did it come with financial support through a grant, which I will also just agree, especially in traditional public schools, the necessity of that flexibility in financing goes a long way for being able to create the opportunity for change in a way that was much faster for us in Salem Public Schools. So really going from meeting WPS in May, having a shared idea of what's possible, partnering in June and opening in August of the 22-23 school year. That partnership also went with our union. So I'll let Karen speak to that about from the beginning, working with our union partners and bringing in teachers and collaborators. We've also partnered with our local education system. So we bring the students outside the building 25 or more times per year. And so that has meant our local PBD Essex Museum, Salem State University, the Center for Civic Engagement, and the School of Education have been amazing partners, and trying to think through how to help prepare students to work with, our partners to work with our students, our adolescents. And then finally, to just really think about students, families, and educators as our partners in this work that all enabled this to take place. So as we were talking with Rennie Center about this work, it feels incredible to not talk as much about obstacles as really enablers that were helping push us forward, because we had a shared belief that we could do better. And what we were offering our children was simply not good enough. And so there was an appetite and an opportunity within the system to try that. And that looked like meeting with all of our rising 8th grade families in the summer. About 90 of them opted in for those 45 seats. Originally, we did a lottery, ensuring that lottery process reflected the full demographics of the beautifully diverse Salem Public Schools, and really charging forward from there. The question has not been obstacles, but really how fast and how far. And we want to make sure that we're doing that to the best of our ability and feel good about what we're putting forward. And so I'll let Karen take over and talk about more partners.
And I'll just say that, again, we were excited, especially me being a part of it from the union side. And we also felt that the needs of students in Salem could be better met by innovating, especially at the middle school level. And we would have conversations around what was necessary to make this pilot program work and what was needed of the educators, and then finding a way to make that work within the confines of the collective bargaining agreement that we had. So teachers, we have extra professional development on Wednesdays. Those of us that are in now the 8th grade experience, it's for the whole 8th grade. And that's paid for through, well, it's a part of the contract. So there's, if you're doing extra hours, this is where your compensation is. So we're able to work through that. There's also creation of a new student success coordinators. We worked with Chelsea, who wrote a job description, and then we, checked in and were able to get that also to work as well, because they are so vital to the way that this model works, for helping kids feel connected, helping them feel successful and feel like they're growing. And also the giving teachers time to form teams. And we did summer professional development work as well to make a team, and that was compensated through what was contractually agreed upon. And giving teachers that time to plan, and giving those teachers time to innovate, giving those teachers the space to do all of that. And we were able to do that through our collective bargaining agreement with very little trouble that I can recall. It seemed fairly easy process.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Karen and Chelsea. All right, Thomas, we're going to come to you, thinking from the perspective of a researcher here. Maybe those kind of enabling conditions, what does research tell us can help drive this scalable change?
Thanks. I will say this as a researcher, I haven't run a program, so you should take anything I say with that grain of salt. But we have studied a lot of programs in Massachusetts and across the country. And I will say that one of the key conditions that we've seen is that it's really hard to get really transformational innovations if you're taking an existing school, an existing class, or existing instructional program within an existing school and trying to change that into something radically different. Now, I don't want to discount that there's still valuable work to be done there. I'm not saying that that's a hopeless effort, but I think within that context, you reach kind of a natural limitation of how much you can do. And that happens for really practical reasons, lots of people are in favor of innovation, but some of the really radical innovations require trade-offs where you just can't do everything as well as it's always done in the past and do things radically different. And so you'll have parents that'll push back and say, yeah, I want innovation for my kid, but I don't want it to come at the expense of the extracurriculars they really like, or at the expense of, are we risking their chances at, college admissions if we do this? Or are we messing up their ability to be with their friends and interact with their friends? And similarly, you'll have educators that'll say, in principle, I like innovation, but if innovation means having to set aside things that I've spent, years building experience and finding strategies and practices that work for me. And if you're asking me to set all those aside and give up the things that I know work and do things that are new and that are foreign and that I don't know if they work for me, or I don't know how long it's going to take to get them to work for me. For really practical reasons, you end up with that kind of friction and that kind of context that limits what you can do. So in our research and our experience, we've seen that where you get the most transformational change is usually outside of an existing school, an existing context, an existing instructional program where you're building something new. Now, but let me be clear, it's not just newness that's the key. Lots of districts launch magnet programs that are new and innovative, but still look a lot like conventional education. They're just, shiny versions of conventional education. The things that we've seen are key is number one, starting with, the students you initially aim to serve need to often be what we call frontier learners. Now, frontier learners, they could be homeschoolers, they could be dropouts, they could be students that just are interested in very unconventional modes of learning. But the key is that frontier learners and their families are people who are eager and willing to accept the trade-offs you're asking them to make. They're saying, look, I'm willing to give up all day school programs to just do something that's part day. Or I'm willing to give up, the access to the AP courses, or give up access to certain, large campus types of activities. I'm willing to give those things up because I'm eager for something different, either because conventional schooling isn't working for me, or just because I value something very different from conventional education. So starting with frontier learners, I think, is key. The other key is having a pretty strong degree of autonomy from conventional education. Now, autonomy, it means a couple of things. One is autonomy from a lot of the policies and structures that are at a district's office. District's offices exist because when you put a whole bunch of schools in a district, you can get some economies of scale where you can standardize some practices and run things really efficiently by having everyone do things more or less the same way. But those practices and those standardizations that are designed to help conventional schools run more effectively often become barriers. So you need some degree of autonomy from a lot of the rules and structures and procedures that a district has created for its conventional schools. But the other degree of autonomy, and Tabiti touched on this, is you need autonomy from a lot of state policy, because a lot of state policy was also designed with conventional schools in mind. So a lot of times, what does this look like? The programs we've seen that are doing some of the most interesting stuff are typically alternative education programs, hybrid virtual schools, career and technical education programs, hybrid homeschooling arrangements, or after school programs, or tutoring, or summer school. Those kind of programs usually exist in that space where you can get that kind of autonomy, not only from typical district operations, but also there's often waivers within state policy. Now, that being said, I'd say there's lots of room and lots of need for pushing state policy to create more flexibility. You typically need to find a space where you can also either negotiate with your state or operate within some kind of pilot program or some kind of exemption program within the state that says, hey, here's a space where you can do things differently.
Wonderful. Thanks, Thomas. This is exciting, exciting to hear. And it sounds like a lot of the folks on this call are doing or have done this work. So very exciting. All right. Our last batch of questions, we're going to kind of focus on scaling this innovation that we've been talking about while at the same time preserving equity. So one challenge that we've seen while scaling innovation is really to ensure that it's serving all students equitably. And too often, I think our most vulnerable students, those already underserved by the system, are the ones disproportionately impacted by experimental models or untested ideas. So looking to hear from you all on what strategies your models used to center equity, to ensure that this innovation that you're doing uplifts all students rather than placing the burden of risk on those with the least margin for error. And maybe if you want to kind of bring in this idea of what those broader enabling conditions were to allow for that, that would be great too. Tabiti, we're going to start with you.
I'm happy to start here, and I'm just checking in on some of the notes that I jotted down, and also trying to synthesize some of my esteemed colleagues' really good thinking so far. I think I'll just be 100% with y'all and just be frank here that we currently exist in a public education system in Massachusetts that frankly doesn't meet the high bar that any of us have for all of our young people. It frankly does not. It certainly doesn't meet DESE's educational vision as outlined in that 2-pager, that sort of beautiful vision around what students should be doing in terms of their learning. Our reality is that the status quo has insufficiently served many of our young people. And so when you pose that question, Alexis, I think about how important it is to just name what's real, right? We have significant opportunity gaps. On average, if you are higher income, if you are non-special ed, if you have English as a first language, if you are white, you have opportunity in this state to achieve at a higher level. That's what the data says. And you could pick a measure. Is it MCAS? Is it graduation rates? Is it attendance? Those demographics are better off, right? They are achieving at higher levels. If you, just to be frank again, if you're a lower income, if you're a special ed, if you're an English language learner, if you're a Black and brown student, generally speaking, you have lower levels of achievement. I think in a system that is already broken, it does more harm to not do more breaking to solve for the young people who we are consistently leaving behind. And when we said that 10 years ago, or 20 years ago, or 50 years ago, or even before Brown v. Board of Ed, it meant one thing. We are still in that system. It is still the same problem. So I will just say that I would like to take risks and say that we need to be risk takers. We need to be opening up avenues for possibility. As Thomas just said, does that mean that we may struggle with some folks? And yes. So what we did at Felix was we went after those pioneering students and families, or you said frontier learners, right? And we said, look, if this model isn't working for you, come join us. If you are a new parent and you have to be home with your child for parts of the day, come join us. If you're someone who works a lot to help sustain the income for your household to pay the rent, come join us, right? So we actually sought out young people for whom the current system does not work, right? That was our target audience. Also, we know that there are a lot of other young people for the system that doesn't work. If I'm an artist of some kind, I'm doing ballet or I'm an elite athlete, right? I'm really great at snowboarding. I'm just making things up now. I want more flexibility with my time. And so I'll sign up for this thing as well, right? Or maybe I'm one of those young people that actually really enjoyed learning on my own during the pandemic. And school, the way it's currently designed, doesn't actually work for me. So I think one of the ways to try to solve for equity possibilities, where equity concerns are an issue, is to not overregulate based on the current model, but to actually create pathways and possibility for individual humans and families that also will serve their needs.
Wonderful. Thank you. And I think being blunt is the only way that we make progress. So I really appreciate your comments, Davidi. Chelsea and Karen, we're going to come to you next for how this has played out in Salem. Chelsea, maybe I'll go to you first.
We were going to have Karen go first. Is that okay?
Wonderful. Karen, let's hear it,
Just
Karen.
to give her the chance to kick it off, and then I'll
Please.
Yeah.
So I think one of the things that I like that we're doing is that we are having ongoing conversations with students and discussing like what their experience in this is and the innovation that we're trying to make, having conversations with them, doing surveys with them. I'm constantly in my classroom asking them, what do they like? What's not working? What do they want to change? And I really do focus on my ML students, my multilingual learner students, focus on my special education students, focus on my students that are, high needs. We have, a large percentage of students that have multiple high needs. And just checking in with them. Is this working for you? What needs to change? What would you like to see different? Did you enjoy this, or was this boring? And then taking that feedback and changing my practice based on the feedback that I'm getting from those students. So that is one way that I have been, and looking along with, this is in addition to looking at data. So, we look at data, we disaggregate the data by groups and everything, but I think it's also important to have those conversations with students and actually have them give you feedback on what's working for them and what is not. I think that's some of the most valuable feedback and that I've gotten is from students seeking that out from individual students, and those opportunities that are built in the way that we're doing middle school in Salem now. Outside of the classroom, Chelsea had mentioned we take the kids out as much as we possibly can. You see kids in a different setting, you see students excelling where normally in a classroom they might not. And it's such a great bonding experience as well. And a chance for students who might not necessarily be, their needs might necessarily be met in a traditional classroom, or just even in a classroom the way we're trying to do it outside of school, just thrive. And that's really exciting to see.
You can also see what a privilege it is to have Karen be the one who's leading this learning. And I'm going to talk a little bit about how the data that we're getting. And so having somebody like Karen dig in and even see her own data and results with students has been essential. So we started with a very small group. When we think about that equity work, we did ensure that the families that went into the lottery were representative of our whole school demographics. So the families that came out of that lottery process were representative. I would call them frontier learners too. These were, we targeted in that outreach students for whom middle school was not working. And that was on both ends of the spectrum. So we had families opt in to give up access to accelerated math, which had been a structure within our school that we knew wasn't necessarily working for kids, but we also didn't know how to get rid of necessarily. And so I'll talk about that a little bit more in a second. So they opted in to, on the high end, that they wanted something that was going to be holistically better for their students and willing to kind of give up on some of the pieces of what they had access to as a result. And our students for whom chronic absenteeism, like they weren't coming to school at all, trying to get them back and engaged and trying to bridge across that diversity of learners. I will just say that there is something, I think that the world thinks that we're special if you work in middle school. We think we think the middle schoolers are special. But that reframing adolescence from that time, our students were saying to us, using analogies like you're at the airport, but you're in the waiting area, but you never get to take off, or a never ending escalator of like, what is the purpose? Why am I here? I know high school matters. I know I learned to read in elementary school, but this middle part, it just felt like survival. And so really trying to turn that into thriving and reframing it to this opportunity for incredible molding and shaping and exposure. And we talk with our kids about going on all of these experiences. You don't actually have to like it. What you need to know is whether you like it or not, so that when you get to high school, you can make those decisions. And so I will say part of what enabled us is not having a high school transcript. We are working in middle schools, and while some of our middle schoolers do apply to go to other schools, I do think that there is some freedom within that space. We're in an expanded learning time school, so we're exceeding some of the baseline requirements. But we also believe that our multilingual learners are learning with their multilingual educator out of the building at museums, and we're working on, the depth of learning and the language experience approach of how to really magnify that learning for all of our learners. But we believe that students are learning in these spaces, and even though on paper we have less formal in-class time, what we're seeing is results for kids. And so that went from a pilot of 43 students in 8th grade to 83 students in 7th and 8th grade to all 270 8th grade students in the district, just as we try to figure this out and scale. But it did matter that particularly in our 8th grade data, we were outperforming in traditional measures and in Transcend's student reported outcomes of that more than twice as, or over twice as many kids reported that they love middle school. And so I think that that has really helped us in that scaling innovation while seeking equity. And the truth is we did go to the whole 8th grade, maybe even before we were ready, because we loved that flexibility, as Thomas has been talking about, and that autonomy that we had. Kids went to specials and lunch together, and then we could kind of do anything we wanted with the rest of the day, as long as we were making everything neat and our educators were on board with it. So we did, in scaling to the whole grade, that does mean we become more of the system itself. But in figuring that out, we didn't want to have a wait list, and we didn't want to have another year of lottery. And so we are scaling and trying to pace the work to make it as inclusive and equitable as possible, so all of our students are engaged in that this year. And it matters to us that that data comes out for every student just the same way. And we're actually seeing the overall, most of the time, I Love School is going up faster this year. And we're still trying to come through on all the different measures. And so it has mattered to have both of those pieces, that freedom and flexibility, and to perform and have those more traditional outcomes and kind of flip our script about how to get there. And so we use high quality instructional materials. We have interim assessments, but we think about that from a different place, from the student driven learning place of empowering our kids. And I do think some of our gains are just because they want to be here, and not a ton of 14-year-olds do. Want to be in school. And so they are able to grow more because they're seeking out. I've got kids coming. We have 20 seats from DESE tutoring, and I put up the list today, and 10 more kids were like, wait, I wanted more time. And that's just awesome to see in a 13 or 14-year-old, to see that they're getting themselves ready for high school, and we're the enabling conditions together.
Amazing. Thanks, Chelsea. That is, that makes me feel joy, knowing that they feel so much joy, and that's what it's all about, right? Giving them that success and hopefully smiling and enjoying it while they're doing it. Almi, we're going to come to you next to think about how you're centering and framing equity in Chelsea Public Schools.
Sure. So basically, it's really about closing learning gaps at an early age. So we're targeting first grade, and this is now those first graders that we targeted. We saw growth with all of our students that received the tutoring. And I will say in 23.7 hours of instruction, 77% of students closed their kindergarten level skill gaps and transitioned to working on grade 1 and 2 foundational reading skills. And so the whole theory of action for us is, if we close the achievement gaps early, then we have more students reading on grade level by 3rd grade. And that was extremely important to us, because we are a district with 57% MLEs. So we have a lot of MLEs and special education students receiving tutoring, and we're seeing gains with all of our students. And it's just remarkable. And now we're in cohort 2, and we have, if I didn't say it early, we had about 350 students each year receiving tutoring in first grade. So now we have a second batch of tutoring for our first graders. And we saw this year's DIBELS for grade 2 on benchmark. We saw more students coming in on benchmark than we did in last year. So we are definitely seeing results, and just really excited about this continuous learning for our first graders. just really focusing on closing the achievement gaps early.
Amazing. Thank you, Almi. That is very, very encouraging. All right, Thomas, we're going to come to you with this last word about how your research is telling us how we should and can center equity in this work.
Well, for this, I'm going to draw on some ideas from other really smart and thoughtful people that I can't take credit for. But I think when thinking about equity in this domain, it's really important to consider, what do we mean by equity? And a description of equity that I really like that comes from Virgil Hammond, who's now the CEO of the Aurora Institute. I heard him speak once at an event, and he said, equity isn't making sure that all kids have the same shoes. It's making sure that all kids have shoes that fit. Along those same lines, I like the work around equity from John Powell, who's at the Othering and Belonging Institute at UC Berkeley. And he talks about this idea of targeted universalism as the way to achieve equity 2.0. Targeted universalism means, well, the universal part of that means that we should have, high expectations for what we want students across our schools to have, and more broadly, what we want people across our societies to have. But the targeted part of targeted universalism recognizes that to help everyone achieve those goals, it doesn't mean that everyone gets the same thing. We need solutions that are targeted to people's particular circumstances and their particular needs. A lot of the programs that I've seen that are doing really innovative work are taking that targeted approach very much to mind. They're saying, look, like, it's really hard to design a program that can be all things to all people and the one universal program that works for everyone. So let's pick a group of frontier learners, whether that's dropouts, whether that's chronically disengaged students, whether that's students with special needs, and let's figure out, how do we design a solution that will work for those students? And in that context, it's really important to remember, universal outcomes needs to be centered on outcomes, not on inputs. So in other words, it means developing goals that are around, ensuring that students have, are on a trajectory to success in adult life, that they're on a trajectory toward thriving. In other words, don't center universal goals on things like high quality curriculum or instructional minutes. Not to say that a program might, I think it's totally fair for a program to say, look, we know that high quality curriculum is important, or we know that instructional minutes are important. If the program decides that's what's needed, that's fair. But I think from a policy lens or from an administrative lens, you need to be focused on, what are the outcomes we want for students, not what are the inputs that we assume are going to lead to those outcomes, because the inputs in a conventional setting are probably not the right inputs for some of these innovative models. I think it's also key in those contexts to recognize that, don't hold up as the bar perfect equity, because as Thabiti mentioned earlier, like, the system we have right now is not achieving the equity that we hope for. So if you say, look, your new program has to nail equity, or else, it doesn't have a place here, like, that's not the right comparison. It really should be looking and saying, look, for these students, compare the system they have now to what we might create for them. And if what we can create for them isn't perfect, but it's better than what they have now, that's something worth trying. And then it's also key, I think, to recognize the importance of continuous improvement in this whole process, that an innovative program is not going to be perfect right out of the gate. That's a problem if we say, look, we designed the perfect program and now we're just going to do that program forever. Well, it's not the perfect program. And if you just do that forever, you're going to just perpetuate inequity. So I think whether it's state leaders or district leaders or the leaders of those programs need to have in mind, look, we are trying something new and innovative. We think it has a lot of promise to be better for equity than what students have right now, but we know it's not going to get everything right on the first try right out of the gate. So how are we going to build into our processes an ability to learn and evolve and improve toward those goals, instead of saying it's a one and done design and whatever we get on our first try is what we're going to stick with.
Awesome. Thank you, Thomas. I think that's a great place to end. And it's been such a rich and thought-provoking discussion. So thank you for all of your time, for all of your thought, for all of your work going into all of this. I really, really appreciate it. Unfortunately, we are running up on time already, but I feel like this group, we could talk all night. So I will try and stop us there for now. I think just for a few kind of closing remarks, I think it's clear that rethinking education is not about, like we've heard, a single solution or even a set of solutions, but it's about a mindset shift and an openness and a willingness to challenge assumptions and to design systems that meet the needs of all of our students. And so to our audience watching this, the task ahead isn't simple, but as we've heard today from all of our panelists, it is possible and it's essential. So hopefully the Rennie Center's Rethinking Education agenda can help to offer a roadmap, but hopefully it's up to all of us to ask these hard questions, embrace bold ideas, and take collective action to build a school system, right? Not just a school, but a system that truly prepares students for their future. So thank you all for joining us, and let's continue this important work together. Thank you so much.